The following presentation was recorded at the CDFAM Computational Design Symposium in Barcelona, April 2026. Learn more at cdfam.com.
Hi everyone. Before starting, I would like you to focus on this part and ask yourself the following question. What an expert will say about this part? A 20 years experienced engineer within seconds could say whether or not this part is manufacturable. What will be the features driving the cost? What are the sorting options? And what tolerance has sense? And most of the time, this kind of information is available in PLM system and other variants. But sometimes the information is unstructured. And companies are very happy to have this experienced engineer that can provide insight to the team within a few minutes. So I have a couple important questions to ask. How can we connect geometry to that business knowledge? And more importantly, how can we spread the knowledge we have from one part to other similars, so that we can turn 2D shapes into actionable business knowledge? I am Luis. I work for Texop 3D, where I hold the position of engineering manager for the machine learning team. I've been working in AI for the last couple of years, and we have a mission on how can we use AI to add value to the engineering industry. In today's talk, I will be showing you how geometry, when connected to manufacturing and business process, becomes intelligence. I will also show you how we develop Hoops AI. That was the framework that we have been using for that. We think that Texop was in a good position to develop this framework because we are one of the companies and offer client users for accessing data. We are capable of reading more than 35 CAD formats and the same for the CA file formats. So we have seen a lot of data over the time. And also we have technology for visualizing CAD data and also CA. So we move the next step, how we can use AI for the CAD. But this doesn't come with an easy answer. There are challenges when we want to address CAD data into AI. And the first thing I would like you to know is that CAD data is not a text. It's not an image, it's not a video. So your LLM cannot try to do many things with that. So we should inject the CAD data to a brain, I agree, but in a suitable format. So CAD data is multimodal. You have it, the geometry formation, the topology. You also have the PMI and other factors. It can be discrete and continuous. And even if you have solved that issue, how you can inject the data into your AI system, you need to solve the dataset collection. You need a lot of data to make AI, specifically machine learning, to learn from. So maybe you will use a lot of file formats, how you handle large data sets that can also add value, how you explore that data. And finally, we know that we want to have a tech stack that is capable of handling all of that. But then we notice that in the community, there is the ingredients. We have tools for opening and reading CAD files. And we have tools for using machine learning, like we have PyTorch, for instance. So the ingredients are there, the teams is not really connected. So we have created Hoops AI on that mission. Our vision was to bridge CAD with machine learning, so now we can unleash the next generation of applications. So there are two main features in this framework. From one side, we have the CAD data, how we can access, how can we transform this information into a machine learning on AI-ready input. And then at the right, how we can actually add some value. We need to solve some specific task. What kind of task we want to solve? And since we are a toolkit provider and other things, we would like to try to solve the more general problem, not one simple one. There was something that we keep in mind when we were building this framework, and that was very clear from day one. We don't want to focus into building a model. We want to focus into building a factory. Because we believe, like OpenAI and Claude are doing, they are releasing different generations of models every 6 months. And we believe the same will happen in this kind of structure. We will get into a model, it will get good result, we have a second version. So the best is to have this factory that is capable of you to generating an advanced model. And also important is that CAD data and your data is private. We cannot access. So the tool needs to be ready for you to use on-premise with your own data. And that's one of the key factors that we use to develop Hoops AI. And fortunately, for solving that problem of how we can inject the CAD data, there is a scientific method actually. Hopefully, there is this geometric deep learning framework. And this framework that is in the state of the art tell us that in order to inject the CAD data to machine learning input, we should transform the data into more representative vectors. We call that an encoding transformation. We can see here, for instance, in the middle, what kind of data we extract, the phase agency graph, for instance, or some other more sophisticated matrix and graphics, so that we can get finally to the machine learning input that an AI can understand, a machine learning can understand. And then when you have this, you want to focus now on want to implement the extraction and transformation of what we call so-called the ETL pipeline. We want to play the same for the CAD file. So we transform the CAD into a machine learning input so that then you have all those libraries that are very powerful to use and to actually learn something. So the transformation in the middle, we just take care of the parallelization. We do it in an optimized way. We know we can load all data in memory. This all is very clear. It's very transparent. We get our first data set. In this video, I will showing the output of this first part of the presentation, where is how when you prepare the data, how you explore the 1000 CAD file. Basically, you explore it by filtering. You will click on some kind of labels, on some kind of specificity, and you will try to visualize here. By the way, I'm using the public dataset pathway for this visualization. So the user can easily query some part of the data so that we can visualize it. These are pictures, of course, but then I will select one of the files, and then we will see the extraction that we mentioned before. Here, I am showing at the left what a mechanical engineer will see, a mechanical part. And in the middle, we have the phase agency graph, and at the right, we have also a point cloud discretization. This is a basics encoder. This is something known in the literature. We filter them now, we focus on the BREF one, and we're working on this one. And for each node, you can attach some attributes, areas, the loop count, on all of the extra information. You can see how by clicking on the node, it is connected to the CAD. So I am basically translating that. The left is how a human will read. The last two is how an AI will try to read. And this is going just to do the first part. We have encoded CAD data, and this is our basics encoder. I'm going to move to a second example, just to show you that this graph becomes completely different, because the graph grows with the phase count. And also we have the discretization. And even if these kind of encoders are very simple, we have also other type of encoders that are also based on the statistical geometric analysis. We have here, for instance, we have need to solve this for solving the task of machine feature recognition on that NIST CAD file. So we have at the right the phase agency graph, and you can see the colors corresponding to the levels. But also I want you to focus on the last two distributions, that is, how you tell an AI how we can encode neighborhood. Basically, when you choose two random faces on the identity graph, you can have the walk between, the topological walk, between the two faces, but you don't have a notion of distance. And for most of mechanical engineers, you can see what is called a view factor, maybe can resonate. And basically, this diagram tells an AI how far, how close, or how two faces, or two pair of faces, they look at each other. And the left down, you can see that the two faces that I have chosen there, they are not touching each other because the distance doesn't start by 0. But at the same time, it's telling me that the faces are not so far regarding to the full bounding box because they are most at the left. And at the same time, the angle distribution is telling me these are not two coplanar faces because there is not only one angle looking at them. So there is a distribution angle. It means that the faces are regulars. So this is the kind of information that we encode to generate that into the AI. So now that we have solved this first problem, that how we know how to inject the data to the AI, we need to come back to our original statement. How we can build shape intelligence based on that. So the first thing we do to evaluate our framework is we use the proprietary architecture, something that is basically re-implemented in the state-of-the-art, and we solve these two problems that are well known: the part classification problem and the feature detection. Basically, this is supervised learning. You label your data, you train your model, and in the part classification problem, for instance, the model tries to give you a prediction within the spectrum of the data he has seen. For instance, we train at the left with 45 part labels, so the AI will always give you a probability on that prediction. And at the right, we do the same with the faces, so we can predict manufacturing features. Whether these results were impressive and also build the state-of-the-art, there are limitations. This requires labeling data. And also it requires solving one specific problem. If you change now the supervised task, you need to train, you need to also solve the problem again, and you also need to label a lot of data. And labeling data is expensive. So supervised learning requires the data. So we have an idea of saying we need to solve the problem differently. What about we scale beyond that? What about if we teach the AI not to give a specific task, but to learn the language of shape, so that we can scale without labeling? So the concept is very simple. The concept is something taken also from what is common. We take the data, we will build something in the middle that will generate the shape embedding with two premises. The shapes that are similar should be closer, the shapes that are not similar should be further. The intelligence that you put in the model in the middle is what basically will make the whole difference. And at the end, the learner representation will help you to not use the level, and then you will pre-adapt your specific task. While supervised learning scales with levels, unsupervised learning scales with data, and data there is available. So what kind of things they can unlock? This unlock a new challenge, a new kind of value. Imagine on the left, you have one part, and you manage to retrieve the 5 most similar in your database. The value of understanding shape now becomes finding similarity. But what happens when you have attached to this part all this information, the manufacturing process, the cost driver on the sourcing? Then you move from understand the shape to basically enable decisions. And you can basically compare or spread information among the parts. The idea, based on that, we have developed and is available in our toolkit something called a hoops embedding model. So, very simple model. We put something in the middle that we will pre-train with a lot of data, so that these learner representation are effectively learned, and with these two premises of finding similar shape are close or different part are far are respected. The logic there is basically to learn from that. And the basic things we can do to prove that is that we took a training data set, which is a public one from on scale. It's the large scale ABC data set. It is about 1 million CAD files. I don't believe all of the parts are labeled, but in this case, we don't need that label. So we took all this data, you can find this reference, and we trained this hoops embedding model for the show. The training was done in a GPU machine of 4 GB RAM, and it took more or less 1 week. That is something that can be accelerated. And once we have this pre-trained model on that public data set, we use a second public data set, to test it. So this data set is of 8,000 parts. It's from a recent publication called the Truly Mechanical CAD data sets. This is the version 2, by the way. And this data set, they have some labels. In our work, we are going to remove that because we're finding similarities. And we want to test how the model performs on these new data sets. So, but before doing that, I need to show the full pipeline. How we find the similarity. So we start from the data set, we use the pre-trained model, and we compute all the embeddings, the vectors. So it is 1 per part. So in the end, I have 8,000 parts. We will index those vectors into a vector store, that is optimized for retrieval. In this example, we use face because it's available in Python. This idea is coming from RAG. It's just that instead of my embeddings being text embeddings, my embeddings are shapes embeddings. When we have done that offline, then we will do the dynamic part, the online mode. We will take a query part, we will do a query, so we will recompute the embedding model. It will be a vector. And now, in that embedding space, we retrieve the parts that are similar. So the embedding vector of the query will go to that space, will find the closest neighbors, and those closest neighbors are going to be given. Here, there's an example. We have a query part. And I recall the dataset is 8,000 parts. And these are the results that it finds most similar for the version we have right now. We can see some files that are very similar, or at least, but also there is something that we need to define here, is that the similarity is non-objective proposition. So we need to try to figure out what the model is really looking at. But here we can see also a similarity score, and we see how the model has found almost the duplicate at the first top, and also parts that are similar. I have a second example. In here, the dataset has a lot of basically duplicated model, but that has basically slightly changed a little bit. So I can say that the first three parts are mostly the same, and we can see a difference in the last one of the retrieval. So the difference comes that this feature that we have in orange, it disappears in the first, is different on the other two. So we can see that that's what the model was looking when looking at the similarity. So now what we can do with this? So because this kind of similarity now are capable of working without supervision, you don't need label data, and you can also retrieve that. So imagine that I do the same query as before, but now this part has some information of the source, in some kind of an email, some kind of metadata, in some kind of building system. And there's another part that has basically the information on the manufacturing process. And another might have the cost driver. The next step is to now build an engine on top of this that we can now infer information from the other similar parts based on what we know and what we have. What is important here is also that the shape similarity didn't need all of that to be trained. And all the data you will be appending days after day will still be available in this workflow because there is nothing being trained hereafter. And also what is important about the toolkit that the data can be trained on your data. Sorry, the model can be trained on your data. You need to reuse that pre-trained model so that you can have better results for your data. Here also I'm going to be showing some of the future works. We want to improve this model and have a version 2 and a version 3 and duplicate what other companies are doing. And we want to add something, what we call custom definition similarity, so that you can decide what is for you, what of the two similar parts are more likely for you. And we are also trying to see how we can improve this with a local ranker. For instance, in this case, I might say that these three parts that I have highlighted are more closer to the query than the second output you give me. And also, in our journey of exploring machine learning, we would like to improve this kind of anomaly we see, which is a very interesting anomaly. In our premise, we mentioned that we wanted similar parts to be close and not similar parts to be pushed away. What we notice in this anomaly is that we have two clusters, because the three anomalies, they resemble each other. So it means that there was something during training that make these two clusters apart being close, and when I'm doing the query, then I got this kind of information. So we want to also add this understanding of anomaly. Finally, I would like to thank you all for your time, and I'm showing here some other results. You can find us in the coffee, and please flash the code so that you can have an overview of Hoops AI, and you can pre-train the model with yourself. Thank you so much.
To learn more about the CDFAM Computational Design Symposium, access the archive of previous presentations, interviews with speakers, and information about future events around the world, visit cdfam.com.